Bonjour, bonsoir.
Good morning, good evening. Welcome to the press conference on the release of the final report on the review of allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse committed during the response to the 10th Ebola outbreak in North Kivu and Ituri in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC. I will be one of the co-facilitators of this press conference with my friend, Madame Kadidia Koulibaly, who's the communications attaché of the Independent Commission. You will receive the report of the Commission in French and English that will be soon posted. I would like to introduce representatives of the WHO, and Khadija will introduce the members of the Independent Commission. With us today, Dr. Tedros, Director General of the WHO, and Dr. Moeti, Regional Director for Africa. Present today are several guests that we will introduce in the next few minutes. You should know that interpretation is provided in French and English. Welcome to all the journalists that are present online, and I will now give the floor to Dr. Tedros for his welcoming remarks. Dr. Tedros, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fadila. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. As you know, in October last year, I appointed an independent commission to investigate allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse during the response to the 10th Ebola virus disease epidemic in North Kivu and Ituri in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The commission was co-chaired by Her Excellency Aïssatou Mindaoudou, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Social Development of Niger, and Madame Julienne Lusenge, an internationally recognized human rights activist and advocate for survivors of sexual violence in conflict from DRC. Today, the Commission published its report. It makes for harrowing reading. I will make my comments shortly, but first I would like to welcome the co-chairs to present their findings, and also like to add, to recognize the presence of the other members of the Commission, Madame Dikere Mary Bokoum, Madame Carole Doucet, and former Minister Malika Koulibaly. Before I give the floor for the Commission to present, I would like to invite my colleague and sister, Dr. Moeti, WHO's Regional Director for Africa, to make some remarks. Shidi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tedros. And I'd like in my turn to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our colleagues in the media who have joined us for this press conference. I would like to join the Director General in thanking very sincerely the Independent Commission, the two co-chairs, the other three members, for carrying out such important work and carrying it out so thoroughly and to this level of quality that you are going to be hearing about. We in WHO are indeed humbled, horrified, and heartbroken by the findings of this inquiry. I'd like also to thank all the women and girls who have come forward and given evidence to the investigation, and thus have given us the basis on which to take action in WHO, which has been necessary. I'd like to indicate that as WHO leadership, we apologize to these people, to the women and the girls, for the suffering that they have had because of the actions of our staff members and people that we have sent into their communities to help in a very difficult situation of an epidemic. I also would like to commit ourselves in WHO to carrying out the recommendations of this thorough analysis of the situation by the Commission, and to promise that it is our determination that such a situation will not happen again on our watch. Thank you very much, Dr. Tedros.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Sidi. And now I would like to invite Madam Julian Lusenge, one of the co-chairs of the Commission, to make her remarks. Madam Lusenge, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. Ladies and gentlemen, journalists, Mr. Director General, Dr. Moeti, Regional Director, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, dear guest. Welcome to this press conference on the occasion of the release of the final report of the Independent Commission on the allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse committed during the response to the 10th Ebola outbreak in North Kivu and Ituri in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. After 12 months of investigation, we know that this report is eagerly awaited. Throughout our work, we have been guided by the principles of law and the protection of victims, the principle of prosecuting the perpetrators of abuse, and the principles of independence, integrity, objectivity, and transparency. Without further ado, and before opening the floor for questions and answers, we'd like to share with you some of the key findings of our report. I will start with the background information. B, mandate of the Independent Commission. C, the methodology we use for the examination of the allegations. D, findings and conclusions. And E, recommendations. A, background. The WHO played a central role in the international response to the 10th Ebola virus disease outbreak in the DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo, between August 2018 and June 2020. During this period, 3,481 people were infected with this hemorrhagic fever known as Ebola disease, and 2,299 people died. This Ebola outbreak in North Kivu and in Ituri provinces, the second largest Ebola outbreak on record, was declared over on June 25, 2020. In response to press reports of alleged sexual exploitation and abuse by WHO staff in the response to the 10th Ebola outbreak, the Director General of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, announced the establishment of an independent commission in charge of investigating these allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse. On October 15, 2020, the Director General of WHO, Dr. Tedros, appointed us, Mrs. Julienne Lusenge and Ms. Aishatou Mindaoudou, to co-chair a 5-member independent commission to examine the allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse committed during the response to the 10th Ebola outbreak in North Kivu and Ituri provinces in the DRC. The 3 experts, members of the independent commission, are Mrs. Marie-Christine Bokoum from Côte d'Ivoire, Ms. Carole-Anne Doucet from Canada, and Mr. Malik Koulibaly from Mali. The context for the response to the 10th Ebola outbreak in North Kivu and Ituri provinces was marked by the magnitude of the epidemic has been the subject of a declaration of a public health emergency of international concern. a context of violence, humanitarian crisis and stress, marked by high population mobility, a very strong mobilization of the international community as well, in terms of financial resources as well as human resources deployed on the ground, and the presence of a predominantly male staff. 73.4% of the jobs were occupied by men and 26.6% by women. The deployment of several day workers by the Ministry of Health and a context constituting a new salary Eldorado for local populations in an economically devastated region. B. Our mandate. The mandate of the Independent Commission is to conduct an impartial, independent, and comprehensive review of the facts regarding allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse during the response to the 10th Ebola outbreak, to identify victims and any weaknesses in the current arrangements within the organization in order to propose measures to prevent such conduct in the future, and more importantly, to ensure that perpetrators of sexual exploitation and abuse are held accountable. In order to carry out its mandate, the Independent Commission recruited a review team through a competitive bidding process to carry out the technical aspects of the investigations and was assisted in its day-to-day operations by a secretariat. C. Methodology. The review team was hired on April 1st, 2021. The review team, which was hired on April 1st by the Independent Commission, is composed of experts specialized in the investigation of allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse and gender-based violence, and is specialized as well in victim and witness protection, psychological counseling, and database management. The review team conducted 5 missions on the ground in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, 1 in Goma, 3 in Beni, and 1 in Bunia. The review team conducted a number of interviews, including remote interviews when circumstances required so. A total of 210 interviews were conducted, including interviews with 75 alleged victims, 23 WHO staff, including 15 staff with various responsibilities related to protection from sexual exploitation and abuse during the response, 32 UN agency staff, 23 staff from international humanitarian organizations, 34 staff from local NGOs, and 23 other individuals with relevant information. The investigators interviewed a number of key WHO officials, including the Director General, as well as other officials who are still with the organization or have left it since then. In order to gather as much information as possible on these allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse, the Independent Commission, through its review team, has issued a call for submissions or a call for witnesses, inviting persons who have been victims or witnesses of sexual exploitation or abuse to share their experiences or information with the Commission's investigators. WHO was requested to circulate this call for submissions to current and former WHO staff to encourage them to provide information to the investigators.
The review team also spoke to several presumed perpetrators that it was able to identify based on witnesses' declarations and individual information available in the documentation. The review team received documents related to 22 interviews with alleged victims carried out by the Internal Oversight Services of the United Nations in January 21 in Mangina, North Kivu, as well as the notification of one case. The team has contacted and interviewed 7 of the persons mentioned in the documentation. The review team also received more than 598,000 documents coming from the WHO under its investigations. These documents contained, beyond an important documentation on policies and prevention strategy against SCA, excerpts from 22 interviews carried out in Mangina, North Kivu, in January 21 by the OIOS, the Internal Oversight Services of the United Nations. DNA was also collected by OIOS in some cases, but the review team did not have access to the results of the analysis of these. Among the documents provided by WHO to the investigators of the Independent Commission are individual files from human resources, professional emails, memos, and documents relating to the response operations to the 10th Ebola epidemic. The review team collected lists of alleged victims from different sources, local NGOs, and health districts. During the interviews with alleged presumed victims, the investigators of the Independent Commission asked these victims for a narrative and put additional questions. After the narrative, a written declaration was drafted and read to the victim through an interpreter if necessary. The review team took all the necessary steps to guarantee the protection of witnesses and presumed victims. These interviews were carried out in safe houses, providing witnesses and victims with the necessary confidentiality and intimacy. The review team also provided psychological support before and after each interview. Electoral IDs, birth certificates, telephone numbers, photos, and descriptions of presumed perpetrators, medical files, data from SMSs and so on were part of the information that the investigators had access to. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is given over to the DG. Thank you very much, Mrs. Lusenge.
Coulibaly, a former Minister of Justice and former President of the National Human Rights Commission of Mali. Mr. Coulibaly, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Directeur Général.
Thank you very much, DG, sir. Observations and conclusions. Within the scope of its work, the Independent Commission carried out an analysis of the normative framework of WHO in terms of SCA and identified structures within the organization which were in charge of managing the response to the 10th Ebola epidemic. The Independent Commission has also coordinated and led investigations on specific SCA allegations against agents of the WHO and its partners or subcontractors during the response to the 10th epidemic of Ebola in North Kivu and Ituri. It based its work on the investigations carried out in the field by the review team and based on the documentation as well. All the observations coming from the analysis of the normative framework of WHO in terms of SCA, following its the analysis of the normative framework of WHO in terms of SCA, and of the structures of WHO in charge of the response to the 10th epidemic of Ebola, the independent commission observed that there was an erroneous interpretation of the notion of beneficiary population. Workers were recruited massively without a call for tender and without background checks. Training was too little and too late in terms of SCA. The management of some incidents of SCA were not followed by a complaint, a formal complaint. Now, regarding the normative framework of WHO in terms of SCA, the independent commission reached the following conclusion. There were obvious structural failures, and there was insufficient preparation to managing risks following SCA incidents. Individual negligence was also observed to the point that it was considered a professional fault. Within its mandate, the independent commission led and coordinated investigations against agents of the WHO and its partners during the 10th Ebola epidemic. It based its work on the work carried out in the field by the review team as well as on the documentation. During its investigations regarding the analysis of the witnesses' declaration, the review team has established that the presumed victims were promised jobs in exchange for sexual relations in order to be able to keep their job. These incidents of SCA were observed in the main zones of the response: 25 in Mangina, 25 in Beni, 20 in Butemo, 4 in Bunia, 3 in Komanja, 3 in Mambasa, 1 in Biakoto, 1 in Oisha, 1 in Katwa, and 1 in Kalungaguta. SCA acts took place in hotels and in other cases in houses rented by the presumed perpetrators. Most of the victims heard by the review team were women. The review team heard 63 women witnesses and only 12 men, their age going from 13 to 43 years of age, the average age being 20. Most victims were in a very precarious economic and social situation during the response. Very few had completed secondary education. Some had never gone to school at all. The women, the more experienced women, were more independent economically and had more social support and were better able to resist sexual proposals. Some SCA was organized by a network operating through the local recruitment branch of the Coordination Center for the Response. Most victims did not get the jobs that they were promised in spite of the fact that they agreed to sexual relations. Some women declared that they continued to be sexually harassed by men, and they were obliged to have sexual relations to be able to keep their job. or even to be paid, and some were dismissed for having refused sexual relations. The review team observed 9 rape allegations. Some victims said that no protection was used by the perpetrator during the sexual act. In some cases, they refused to use a condom. 6 presumed victims stated that they gave birth before term. Other victims said that the men who had abused them forced them to have an abortion. The review team also conducted interviews with 12 men who explained the effects of the SCA on their marriage and their family, and said that they too were victims of SCA. 29 cases there are 29 cases of women being pregnant, and 22 cases of actual births following these pregnancies. Based on information gathered from the presumed victims and other witnesses, the review team began the identification of the presumed perpetrators. The team did not simply compare the list of employees of WHO in the field. It also extended its research to all of the partners working with WHO during the response. The review team established that 21 of 83 perpetrators were employed by WHO during the response. They conducted interviews with the alleged perpetrators. 6 denied any involvement in SCA. The review team noted that allegations of SCA and sexual harassment were made against medical officers, consultants, and other employees of the WHO, some nationally and other internationally, and other members of the medical staff that were deployed by the Ministry of Health. It examined in Beni the case of Jean-Paul Ngandou, and this led to an amicable settlement. The review team noted that accusations of SCA were also leveled at members of the staff for immunization and risk communication, persons having responsibilities at human resources level, etc. The review team noted that a number of allegations of SCA were brought against drivers and security personnel. It also noted that some staff were sent to occupy other positions during the response. The review team determined that if some women were victims of SCA several times during the response, other presumed perpetrators seem to have committed SCA several times against several alleged victims. The independent commission states that there is no exhaustive list of alleged victims or of alleged perpetrators. In this respect, the independent commission continues to receive information regarding investigations relating to SCA allegations against agents of WHO and its partners or subcontractors during the response to the 10th Ebola epidemic in North Kivu and Ituri. The commission has made the following conclusions. In spite of the poignant narratives of the victims, most of the perpetrators denied the facts and even stated that the sexual relations were consensual. The Independent Commission notes the scope of the SCA incidents during the 10th Ebola epidemic, everything having contributed to increasing the vulnerability of the alleged victims. They did not benefit from aid and assistance. The Independent Commission notes that cases of SCA were committed both by national and international staff working for the WHO during the response to the 10th Ebola epidemic. The Independent Commission notes that the staff of the institution that the victims perceive the alleged perpetrators as benefiting from impunity. The Independent Commission notes the disparity between the number of alleged victims of SCA and the total absence of notification of cases of SCA at institutional level. The interviews with with those in charge of the organization conducted by the review team show that the organization was not prepared to face this type of SCA incident. The Independent Commission notes that some victims were highly vulnerable and did not benefit from any support. Many victims say that they lacked aid and assistance, and the list of alleged perpetrators indicates clearly that SCA was not carried out by a single group. All the categories of workers, national and international, domestic and international, carried out acts that may be qualified as SEA. Thank you.
And finally, I would like to invite Madam Aishatu Midaudu, the other co-chair and former foreign minister of Niger, to make her remarks. Madam Aishatu, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. Based on the analysis carried out, the investigation carried out, and the statements of the victims, the identification of the presumed or the alleged perpetrators, the Independent Commission formulated 21 recommendations addressed to WHO in the 8 following areas. First of all, policies and procedures in prevention and control of sexual abuse and exploitation. The second recommendation has to do with the management system to deal with incidents in terms of prevention and control of SCA. Thirdly, awareness raising with the communities concerned. Fourthly, further training in terms of prevention and control of SCA. Inquiry system in terms of the above, or investigation system rather, access of alleged victims to assistance and reparation, initiation and monitoring of DNA tests, and setting up a monitoring mechanism for the implementation of the recommendations of the Independent Commission. Now, regarding procedures and policies,
l'OMS doit s'assurer que les politiques et procédures en matière de prévention et de lutte contre l'exploitation et les abus sexuels
for prevention and responding to sexual exploitation and abuses are effectively implemented by adapting them to the operational context. The Independent Commission recommends to fill the gaps in cultural approaches as well as on the field and in headquarters, define in a more clear way the authority and decision lines within the organization in terms of prevention and SEA committed by anyone working for the organization. Allocate a substantial budget and qualified personnel to ensure the success of initiatives and awareness campaigns among the organization's staff regarding the prevention of and response to SEAs. And finally, to include in the future a specialist team on SEA as a main activity and not on the side, because currently the WHO tends to appoint focal points. So this would be a primary function rather than a secondary function, as is currently the case with the appointment of focal points. Incident management system for the prevention of and fight against SCAs. The Independent Commission recommends to carry out a review of the WHO emergency response framework and emergency standard operating procedures be undertaken to reflect organizational and staff obligations to prevent and respond to SEAs. To integrate the concept of prevention and response to sexual exploitation and abuse into all levels of health emergency program design and implementation. To undertake a comprehensive sexual exploitation and abuse risk analysis prior to deployment and adapt it as the program is implemented. Integrate qualified SEA prevention and response teams into all complex field management structures. And finally, to focus advocacy work on prevention and response to SEA on the most vulnerable in host communities, particularly women and children. As far as ongoing outreach to affected communities, the Independent Commission recommends the WHO to ensure that host communities are continuously informed about acts of sexual exploitation and abuse and reporting systems. Align WHO policies on SEA with the UN's community-based protection of civilians strategies to, among other things, better address reporting. As far as ongoing training for prevention and response to SEA, the Independent Commission recommends to make successful completion of the knowledge tests on prevention of and response to SEA and abuse a prerequisite for the deployment of staff to emergency areas, whether they are staff or organizations, consultants, contractors, or other service providers. Conduct a regular evaluation of the reporting policy to ensure that it is not only effective, but that a much larger number of incidents of SEA are addressed at a minimum. And finally, impose disciplinary sanctions on those who fail to report incidents that may fall under the category of SEAs. on sexual exploitation and abuse prevention and investigation system, the Independent Commission recommends to systematically initiate preliminary investigations without waiting for specific individual complaints at the first suspicion that SEA may have been committed in the course of an operation or activity undertaken by the organization. Immediately initiate an internal investigation in this case for the purpose of identifying individual responsibilities for the failure to activate the investigative procedures set forth in the March 2017 directive, to immediately initiate investigations, in this case, against the alleged perpetrators, identifying those who will be identified in the course of said investigations in order to assess their responsibility with regard to the applicable norms and principles in the prevention and fight against SEAs, and especially with regard to the provision of the March 2017 directive, and to apply the disciplinary sanctions provided for. That these investigations will concern the organization's current staff as well as those who are part of it but left the organization during the 10th response to the Ebola epidemic. On access to assistance for alleged victims and the right to reparations, the Independent Commission recommends that a working group be set up within the organization to reflect on the modalities for providing support and psychological assistance to presumed victims for the first reports of incidents until the completion of preliminary investigations. And finally, to also mandate this working group to reflect and make proposals on the possibilities of granting reparations to the victims at the end of duly initiated investigations, starting with the conclusions of the Independent Commissions in this case. On initiation and follow-up of DNA testing, the Independent Commission recommends to take all possible arrangements for reliable DNA testing in coordination with the Office of Internal Oversight Services at the UN Secretariat in cases where alleged victims have become pregnant and alleged perpetrators have been identified, and communicate the results of these tests to the alleged victims in order to assert their rights and those of their children. The Commission recommends DNA testing for children also. The Independent Commission thought that it was important to submit a final recommendation and recommends to establish within 2 months of the publication of this report an independent monitoring mechanism for the implementation of the Independent Commission's recommendations. I'd like to thank you.
Madam Aishatu, thank you all once again for the Commission's work and for your briefing today. The first thing I want to say is to the victims and survivors of the sexual exploitation and abuse described in the Commission's report. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what was done to you by people who were employed by WHO to serve and protect you. I'm sorry for the ongoing suffering that these events must cause. I'm sorry that you have had to relieve them in talking to the Commission about your experiences. Thank you for your courage in doing so. What happened to you should never happen to anyone. It is inexcusable. It's my top priority to ensure that the perpetrators are not excused but are held to account. As the Director General, I take ultimate responsibility for the behavior of the people we employ and for any failings in our systems that allowed this behavior. And I will take personal responsibility for making whatever changes we need to make to prevent this happening in future. The Commission has done outstanding work to get the voices of victims and survivors heard. But the investigation is not complete and will require further work. But we must act immediately, and we will, in 3 areas. First, support, protection, and justice for the victims and survivors. Second, actions to address management and staff failures. And third, wholesale reform of our structures and culture. First, support, protection, and justice for victims and survivors. As you have heard, the Commission has identified dozens of potential victims of sexual exploitation and abuse and 21 alleged perpetrators who were employed by WHO at the time of the events. The victims were only able to provide first names for several other alleged perpetrators whom we are yet to fully identify. For those cases, WHO is engaging an external investigative service to assess what additional steps are required. Based on the information we have, the organization will ban the identified perpetrators from future employment with WHO, and we will notify the broader UN system. We're terminating the contracts of 4 people identified as perpetrators who were still employed by the organization when we were made aware of the allegations against them. WHO will also refer the allegations of rape to national authorities in DRC for investigation and in the country of nationality of the alleged perpetrators where applicable. We have requested confirmation from the Independent Commission that the victims of rape have provided consent for WHO to refer their cases to the relevant national authorities. Providing services and support to victims and survivors is our central concern. WHO is not yet aware of the identity of the victims and survivors. As we receive more information from the Commission on their identity and location, we will ensure that they all have access to the services they need, including medical and psychosocial support and assistance for education for their children. These services are available in DRC from our partners across the UN system. We're committed to a survivor and victim-centered approach that prioritizes their needs, preferences, and participation as we expand services in DRC and around the world. Although the Commission's work has ended, we have provided continued access to anonymous reporting mechanisms for incidents of sexual exploitation and abuse. Anyone who calls to complain will be referred to services. Second, actions to address management and staff failures. The Commission has identified negligence on the part of certain individuals that may amount to professional misconduct in the management of some of the incidents reported. In my view, the failure of WHO employees to respond adequately to reports of sexual exploitation and abuse is as bad as the events themselves. We must have zero tolerance for sexual exploitation and abuse, and zero tolerance for inaction against it. I deeply regret that the suffering of victims may have been exacerbated by the apparent failings in the way the organization handled reports. The Commission has recommended an investigation to identify individual responsibilities for the failure to activate investigation procedures, and we are taking immediate steps to initiate that investigation using an external investigative service. While that investigation proceeds, the organization has placed 2 senior staff on administrative leave, and we're taking steps to ensure that others who may be implicated are temporarily relieved of any decision-making role in respect of allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse. It's important to be clear that these actions do not in any way prejudge the outcome of the investigation and are not in a disciplinary measure or attribution of guilt. The organization will initiate appropriate disciplinary action in respect of findings of misconduct from the investigation. We have also asked the Independent Expert Oversight Advisory Committee to engage an external body to conduct an audit into cases processed by WHO's internal oversight services to establish whether any further cases of incidents of possible sexual exploitation and abuse were subject to procedural failings. Third, we will undertake wholesale reform of policies and processes to address sexual exploitation and abuse. But we must go further to identify and address any shortcomings in our culture or leadership that fail to adequately protect the people we serve, or that create opportunities for abusers to exploit. The Commission has identified the need for fundamental changes in our structures and institutional capacity for preventing, detecting, and responding to sexual exploitation and abuse in the communities we serve. We will engage external experts and services to make sure this happens. We need to make sure that victims and survivors of sexual exploitation and abuse have safe and easily accessible reporting mechanisms anywhere in the world. As you know, the Ebola response in North Kivu and Ituri was a large and complex operation in a highly insecure region, requiring large-scale recruitment of local and international personnel. But none of that is an excuse for sexual exploitation and abuse. We accept that we should have taken stronger measures to screen candidates and ensure more effective human resources processes. Already, we have taken several steps to improve our HR practices in recruitment, onboarding, induction, and training. We will also take steps to integrate standards of behavior relating to sexual exploitation and abuse in performance management, starting with leaders and managers. We have also initiated special briefings for managers, especially at the country level. Going forward, WHO country representatives, incident managers, health cluster coordinators, and directors will be required to participate in additional training to ensure that they are able to create an environment for the prevention of sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment, and to take managerial action without delay in case of any suspected incident. I will ensure we provide sufficient resources and staff for the work ahead of us. The Commission has made 7 recommendations with 20 specific actions. Many of these actions are already underway, and we will expand our work to include other priorities recommended by the Commission. We plan to
Nous envisageons d'avoir un plan d'action de la direction en accord avec l'accord des pays membres dans les 10 jours. et la transparence.
To further strengthen accountability, we have asked the Independent Oversight and Advisory Committee of the WHO Health Emergencies Program to monitor and report transparently on our progress. Once again, I would like to thank the Commission for its work, as well as the journalists who first reported the allegations that led to the initiation of the Independent Commission's investigation and report. Thank you. We value the role of the media in covering and uncovering these issues and in holding WHO accountable. I struggle to find the words to describe my feelings when I first read the Commission's report. The conduct it describes is a sickening betrayal of the people we serve. But it's also a betrayal of our colleagues who put themselves in harm's way to serve others, including those who paid the ultimate price, killed by armed groups in North Kivu while working to protect the health of vulnerable communities from Ebola. This is a dark day for WHO. But by shining a light on the failures of individuals and the organization, we hope that the victims feel that their voices have been heard and acted on. We want the perpetrators to know there will be severe consequences for their actions. We expect and demand that all our staff at all levels understand the heightened responsibility that comes with working for WHO. We will hold all leaders accountable for inaction in any suspected incident of sexual exploitation and abuse. We are acutely conscious that we need to rebuild trust with the people we serve, with our member states, with our partners, and with our workforce. Only then can we succeed in our mission to promote health, keep the world safe, and serve the vulnerable. I thank you. And Fadila, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. I will hand over to my friend and colleague Khadija for the question and answer session. Over to you, Khadija.
Okay. Bonjour, messieurs, dames.
Good morning, journalists. Thank you for your attention. We'll now open the floor to your questions. I would remind journalists to ask one question per journalist, and if we have more time, you'll be asked to send your questions. Christopher Ford from the AFP, you have the floor, and I would like to remind you to activate your mic. Christopher, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to ask the question. I would like a clarification on the following point. How many people have been sentenced? Who are they? And what was their responsibility within the WHO? Could we have further information on this? Thank you. Thank you. I would like to ask Ms. Lusenge to respond to this first question as to the sentencing of the perpetrators. Thank you, Khadija. The Independent Commission was mandated to verify the allegations published in the print media. We did our job. We've just published our first report with the findings of our investigation, including recommendations so that the WHO can take it up from now and that the perpetrators be held accountable. So it is now up to the WHO. Dr. Tedros just explained to us what is going to happen. They're going to have a mechanism which will be in charge for deepening investigation and to take actions against those perpetrators. It is not up to us to say this person should be arrested and sentenced. The results of our work was given to the WHO. It is now up to the organization. Thank you. Jason Beaubien from NPR, you have the floor.
You can explain in such a difficult situation where there's such a disparity between the locals and your staff in terms of economics, how you hope to deal with this in the future.
Dear Jason, can you come again? Your question wasn't very clear. Thank you.
Yes, sorry. The question is about in a situation where there's such an economic disparity between your staff in the field and the locals who are there and are often in a desperate economic situation, how can you better handle that disparity between the two groups and avoid these types of situations of exploitation?
Oui, Madame Mindaoudou.
Madam Maïchatou, you have the floor. The first two questions are for the WHO, and I think Dr. Tedros should answer this question as well. I think that the very important question raised by Jason, I will ask my colleague, who's the head of these issues at the WHO. Gaia, you have the floor.
You touched on one of the most complex issues that we have to address. Sexual exploitation and abuse is about the power differential, and you're absolutely right. When we go into these vulnerable areas, we have to bring in resources and money, and there is such a disparity. And so it cannot be addressed just by us, but you asked what the organization can do. There are things already highlighted in the report that we can do. We do have to have stronger hiring practices. And people have to know from their candidature, from their wish to work for WHO, from that moment, the standards of conduct that we expect. And of course, there are tactics, trainings, awareness, supervision, creating that environment. But we have to be honest, this does not 100% address this. It's a joint issue that we have. Many of the recommendations of the Independent Commission, in fact, point to measures that are in our control to minimize this. What we have in our control is the behavior of our staff and our managers. But the issue of exploitation, gender-based violence are related to bigger issues. It's not a satisfactory answer, but it is a challenge that we have to address together.
Okay. Je vais maintenant donner la parole à...
I would like to give the floor to Maria Cheng. Maria?
Hi, thank you very much for taking my question.
Thank you.
Dr. Tedros personally oversaw the response to the Ebola outbreak and went to Congo 14 times. How conceivable is it that somebody who was on site so often wouldn't be aware of these allegations, especially if they concern somebody they personally knew? If someone from the panel could respond to that. And then Dr. Tedros, I wanted to ask you, Since this appears to be the worst ever instance of sex abuse within the entire UN system, and you say you take responsibility, are you considering resigning, or are you going to go ahead with your second term? Thank you.
So yes, thank you. I think I have been there, as I said, 14 times, and this issue was not raised to me. Probably I should have asked questions. And the next steps, what we're doing is we have to ask questions. Thank you.
OK. Merci beaucoup. Maintenant, je vais passer la parole.
Thank you. I would like now to give the floor to Miss Paisley Dodds. You have.
Thank you. So as you know, we interviewed and discovered more than 70 women in both of our investigations. I have 3 questions regarding that. You also say that you found 73 girls and women. I'm wondering how much overlap there is with the women and girls who we already spoke to, just in terms of getting an idea of the scope of the problem. The second question is with regard to reparations. One of the Commission's recommendations is for reparations. What would that look like in terms of what WHO is actually willing to do? Dr. Tedros, you had mentioned help for schooling, psychological counseling, other types of remedies, but this is the first time that I'm seeing recommendations for reparations. And lastly, you said that some people have been dismissed, other people have been suspended. How many WHO workers are actually pending investigations? That's it.
The first question, la première question.
The first question is for the independent commission. Ms. Aishatu, you have the floor. Thank you. I did not hear the first part of the question, so if you could repeat the first part of your question, I would appreciate.
Can you come up with the first question again?
Happy to. So we interviewed more than 70 women and girls during both of our investigations. You said that you found about 73. I'm wondering how much overlap there is with the women and girls who we talked to, just so we can get a sense of how much larger the scope of the problem is.
Merci, c'est compris.
Oui.
First of all, let me thank you for your presence today and for asking this question to the Independent Commission. I would like to remind you with all due respect that, as Dr. Tedros said, it is us humanitarian workers who highlighted the issue of acts of SEA. We never wanted to cooperate with the Commission. We went to see Manchurian to ask them to communicate with us the cases that they had heard of, but they refused to communicate. And so we found those 73 victims, and I can assure you that there is no overlap. However, I would like to express on behalf of the Commission our appreciation for the fact that when we were done with our work in the field, once our experts left, someone from humanitarian called under a false identity to share with us a list with the name of 10 alleged victims. So we had left already. And in spite of this, we asked our team to go back and interview these victims that had been communicated by new humanitarian. So I would like to tell you that there is no duplicate in the number of victims. One can interpret this as a larger problem, but they're all different and separate victims that we interviewed. Thank you.
C'est à l'OMS. Merci.
Gaïa, vous avez la parole.
We acknowledge that we need funds easily available on the ground for victim and survivor support. That's very clear. Victims and survivors need to be funded for medical, psychosocial, livelihood, and other support. And one of the issues that we have been discussing about is how to get this support and this money easily available. However, there is no provision in the UN system for financial reparations to the victims. But that does not stop us from making sure that funds are allocated for support and assistance as we move forward. And I really look forward to working with the UN Victims' Rights Advocate and others to make sure that this happens. This has to happen across the system, not just by WHO, but WHO commits to making funds available operationally and easily accessible.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam. Jeremy Lange from RFI, you have the floor. Jeremy.
I'm afraid that I will ask a question that has been asked again, asked before, but I didn't quite get it. Can you tell how many people from WHO have been whether sacked or dismissed or pending dismissal? Can you be precise with the numbers? What I heard is that 21 members of WHO were under inquiry. Can you tell what happened to those people and if you have the nationalities too? Thanks.
So apart from what has already been said by the Independent Commission and in the Director General's response about the 21 alleged perpetrators who were employed at the time of the event, and the administrative action that we have taken for managerial neglect, it's difficult to give the exact details because, as was said before, the Independent Commission gave us a great deal of information and data which we have just received. And that's why we really are committed to having fast review of those to see how we can pursue them, what can be done. I think the Independent Commission agrees that more investigation is required. What the Director General said is that this process will not be business as usual. We will fast track it, we will get external expertise, but we also have to follow due process. Otherwise, we will get to a position where we can't take the action that we need. And we have to do that in that way. So I can't give you more than what is in the Independent Commission report and in the Director General's statement at the moment.
Okay. Merci beaucoup, Docteur.
Thank you, Gaia. I would like to give the floor to Simon Ateba, Today News Africa.
Thank you for taking my question. This is Simon Ateba with Today News Africa in Washington, D.C. I just want to get the basic fact. If I understand very well, 83 perpetrators were identified to have sexually exploited and abused women in DR Congo, including 21 staff of the WHO during the Ebola outbreak there. I don't know why you can't give us a specific number. Out of the 21 staff of the WHO, how many of them have been sacked so far, right now? Why can't you give a number? How many of them remain with WHO? Come on, give us a specific number. These people abuse women, exploited women. So some of those women became pregnant and they now have children. Why can't you give us a specific number right now? How many of them are still with WHO? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me try that once again. All right. So as was mentioned by the Director General, we are terminating 4. These are 4 consultants who have contracts with WHO today. In order to look at people who were employed at the time, we still have to investigate. So in this list, we have found 4 who have contractual status with WHO, and they are terminated. That is the action we have taken in the few hours since we have received this report.
Je vais peut-être donner la parole maintenant.
Let me give the floor to Mr. Derek Wharton from, legal counsel at WHO. He will give you perhaps more details.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to add a point of clarification on what's already been said. Just to clarify that the 4 contractors whose contracts have been terminated were the only 4 who still were employed by WHO. So out of the 21, they were the only 4 who were continuing to be in our employment. So if you're asking how many others there are out of the 21, the answer is none.
Thank you, Derek.
I will add to that. As you know, the Ebola response took 2 years, but most of those who were working were temporary. So of the 21, other than the 4 that whose contract is terminated now, must have left as soon as Ebola was controlled. So most of them were on a very short term. So that's what we assume. But we got the report only a couple of days ago. We need to find out what happened. But what I expect is that they left as soon as Ebola was under control. Then you said 83 total. As you know, this response was, a UN-wide response, although it was coordinated by WHO. And of the 83, there are people who have worked for other UN agencies and for other organizations who participated in the response. So we're focused today on WHO because we installed the independent commission, and also the independent commission hired an independent investigator called JRR to focus on WHO. So we're talking about WHO. But the response was from many organizations, and the 83 total will cover other organizations other than WHO. But today we're focusing on WHO. Thank you.
Okay. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Directeur.
Thank you, DG. I would like to give the floor to Carmen Pone from Politico. Carmen, if you can hear us, you have the floor.
Members or the representative of the Commission, whether they can say at what level of the WHO management there was knowledge of what was going on, or there was knowledge at least of the allegation of what was going on. I know in the previous reporting from my colleagues, there were stories that, high-level managers knew about it but did nothing. And the WHO has said that the independent commission will be able to shed some light on this. So I wanted to know, were there people in the WHO headquarters that were aware of these allegations when they were happening or soon after they're happening? Can the commission shed any light on that? Thank you.
Je voudrais donner la question.
I'll pass the question to Madame Mindaudu. Carmen's question. Once again, I wasn't following, says Madame Mindaudu. Could you repeat your question?
Did the Commission have any findings? Sorry, I didn't get to read the report as it was just released during the briefing. Did the Commission have any finding about the level of the WHO management that was aware of the allegations, either as they were happening or soon after they happened? Because there were media reports saying that people in the high-level management in the WHO headquarters were aware of these allegations, but didn't take any measures at the time to investigate them or to to try to get to the bottom of it. Did the commission get any findings on that? Thank you.
Oui, je vous remercie.
Thank you for your question. I can tell you here categorically that the independent commission did not know at the beginning of its investigation that there were some at higher level in WHO, who were aware of what was going on and did not act. We only discovered this during our investigation. When we started our work, we did not know that some at WHO might be aware of these allegations and incidents. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that the press conference is about to be concluded. I wanted to ask the two co-chairs whether they would like to add anything before we conclude. I would like to say to journalists that we will continue to respond to their questions through channels such as WhatsApp and email. Madame Julienne, you have the floor. Thank you. I would like to thank all the journalists who have been following this press conference and thank them for their questions. We are available to respond to any questions, and as my co-chair has said, during the investigation, it was only during the investigation that we discovered that there were failures and negligence and lack of due process, investigations that were not immediately started based on allegations. Right after supervisors were informed. So we did our job and we submitted our report to WHO. We came here to Geneva to launch the report, and then we will be traveling to Goma to launch the report in Goma and meet authorities there, local authorities, meet the women to impart the findings of this report and tell them what we discovered following the investigation conducted by the independent commission. So we will be following up the recommendations of this report so that this report be followed by action. Madame Mindaoudou, did you want to add something? Yes. I would like to add something that is perhaps a little bit outside the scope of the Commission's mandate. As I've said, I wanted to congratulate journalists, since this is a press conference, and given what they know, they are at the forefront of reporting and denouncing sexual abuse and exploitation. It's based on an article in the New Humanitarian that this entire process was started. But I would like to appeal to them. Whenever institutions take decisions and try to find clarification following incidents, I feel that for the benefit of victims, we need to cooperate so that we may quickly identify perpetrators and compensate the victims. This is what my conclusion, and I would like to encourage journalists to cooperate with us so that everyone together at institutional level, in the media, and within the civil society, we need to cooperate so that events such as these never occur again. Thank you. Thank you, Madame Mindaoudou. Fadela?
Like to have some final remark.
Est-ce que les autres membres de la...
Do other members of the Commission have something to add? Carole Doucet, you have the floor. Thank you.
The only thing I would like to say is that the work that has been done in the course of the year was extremely challenging. We all worked very, very hard, and we had good support throughout. And we're looking forward definitely to the implementation of the recommendations. As somebody today said, the work just starts now. But also we're looking forward to seeing maybe, you know, this type of work. Will it serve as maybe like some sort of good practice? Because it is the first time that it is being done this way, I think. So it's a first of its kind. But for us, the work, the real work, will start with implementation of recommendations. And also we look forward to going to Goma to meet Congolese women, some of the survivors and the authorities, because they will also be very concerned with action after all of this, this groundwork and this analysis and these conclusions. Merci.
Merci, Madame Doucet.
Thank you, Madame Doucet. Marie-Christine Bokoum, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you to everyone here. Thank you to the DG of WHO, and thank you to the journalists for their interesting questions. I would like to add this. This is a first, as has been said, the first time that we have an external body carrying out this investigation, as my colleague has stated, but I would like to stress the fact that implementing the recommendations is extremely important. For several years, persons have been complaining about abuse by United Nations workers. So the fact that we have reached out to communities who are victims of this abuse constitutes a first step towards reestablishing trust with these communities. The trust that these communities may have towards the United Nations. So the main part of our work is beginning with the implementation of recommendations, and we want these measures to be implemented as quickly as possible in order to bolster the trust that communities should have towards humanitarian workers. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madame Marie-Christine Bokoum. I think we can now conclude this press conference. We'd like to thank the journalists for having been patient and very thorough in their questions. We're sorry that we were unable to take every question. We have just issued this report, and now we will continue to work with you, members of the media. We will continue to take your questions and follow up with you through other channels. Thank you, DG Sir. Thank you to all the members of the Commission. I declare this press conference adjourned.